Hello, YouTubers and all those who happen to watch. A very generous donation to my collection by KreeBoy411 here on YouTube donated me this console, the Sega Saturn. Of course, this console was produced and it sold over 9.5 million units, which is a pretty astounding number. But you know, it's just the point that this console had a lot of promise, a lot of premise. Now, I'm not going to go into too many specs because I'm not here to bore you. I'm just here to let you know about the system briefly and, you know, share some gameplay. So I only have one game anyway. But, alright. The first things first, this console is thick. The reason it's so thick is because it's housing two CPU units, which is supposed to be this gigantic brick house of, you know, power. It's supposed to be a really powerful gaming console. However, one of the drawbacks is that it was really difficult to house this much power back in the day. And it was, you know, very disappointing that a lot of companies, you know, didn't want to bother with the console. I mean, in Japan, there was fantastic titles for this console. Like, it even had Castlevania Symphony of the Night in Japan. That was an awesome game. If they could have released that for the American Saturn, I think this console would have took off so much more. The units would have been sold because of that game. I mean, later on, it was sold for the PlayStation X. And I mean, back in the day, you know, importing wasn't quite commonly spoken about, and not people really had the internet back in the day to even consider that. I mean, I don't think eBay was around too much either. This console was discontinued like 3 years after it was released. So, think of, you know, 2008. It was, 1998. It was discontinued. And, you know, it was really disappointing. I mean, this console had a lot of premise. It could house a lot of power if it was utilized right. I mean, there's a couple games, for example, I was shown it by Strictly Sega. He showed me a video before. It was Mr. Bones. I looked at the graphics and everything, the rendering, and it showed some potential behind the unit. It actually showed a lot of potential, what this console could have done. Sadly, it was not utilized too well. I mean, this was supposed to be the corresponded console that goes against the Sony PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and the N64, and sadly this console got its ass handed to it. And I think for a while, Sega got their ass handed to them for a couple misses with their consoles. The Sega CD, it wasn't too popular. I mean, it was too many of those CGI, film, quick time event games. It was not really common to find a game that was, you know, premised to what the potential of a CD disc can use. They're too busy working on the fam and glam of the video and live action and everything. I thought that was what drawing Sega back big time with this series of CD consoles they came out with. And the downfall, obviously, the Dreamcast, which was the processor of this. I mean, again, it wasn't very good. But again, I'm not here to bore you. But alright, first thing you're gonna notice is this, of course, looks identical to the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation 2 power cord, which is, you know, two prongs here, one's a little square, the other one's circular. And it plugs in the back of this console, which is right back there, which is conveniently connected to the communications connector and the AV out, which of course use a RF for this. You can plug this into your VCR or whatever you got that has cable. You can just plug it in. But again, this console had a lot of interesting little attachments you can get for it. I mean, again, it was not quite, you know, elaborate and amazing, but it offered pretty interesting options. I mean, again, this is of course standard. You just plug it in, bam, powers it on. You got the console working. Curious about the spot, what's it actually used for. A couple of the accessories you can add to it, which is quite interesting, seeing that you can house this, is in fact, be very delicate with this because these are hard to find a little bit, is you can get these little memory slot, the card kind of slotted items, and you could slide in a card that actually lets you play VCDs, which were these Chinese Hong Kong like equivalents of like a ripped off DVD. And you can just put them in there, it slides in, connects in, you just close this up, and you basically, there you go. Now this console did have battery backup for it, just like the Dreamcast. And you just put it in there, like so, and you just, there you go, you're off on the racetrack, so to speak. Again, though, it was sort of a disappointment that a lot of consumers had to, like, literally go in there, pop out a battery just to replace it. It was just like annoyance 101. But again, I mean, it wasn't too bad. You just replaced it, popped it back in. I mean, it was easier than, you know, the entire soldering process you had to do with, like, game cards back in the day. But again, I thought that was quite interesting how they added that. Made it easier for people just to slide their fingers in there, quickly replace it, because I guess if you don't put it back in, I'm not too hardcore, like, knowledge of it, but I assume that if you don't keep that in there, something bad happens. But that's why I usually keep a battery in there for now. I mean, I got a replacement battery, but I mean, it's easier than Pi just to replace the battery. It's like a couple bucks, and you get like 2-pack. But either way, this had really interesting options for memory save, as well as the converter, which of course is used up here. You're gonna notice this little slot here. You're gonna assume this is actually for games. You think, oh, you can put your Sega Genesis cards in there. Well, you notice right there that is not spacious for a Sega Genesis card. I don't think that would ever work. If it did, you deserve a medal. But this was actually used for memory, so you can save your games. So sort of like how the PlayStation had their little slots here. You put the memory card in, you got like 8 megabytes or so, or 256, whatever they had, and you just plug it in there, and wham bam, thank you ma'am. That's the interesting spot of it. This was also used for a converter, which you can actually play international games like Japan and Euro games on this cart slot. And it was really interesting that, you know, there's a lot of great games, the Japanese version, and all of them are radically cheaper. And, you know, again, if you're going to go for a Sega Saturn, I would highly recommend going for the Japanese versions of the games, unless, of course, they're RPGs, and you can find them really cheap, and go for the American RPGs if you have the money. But other than that, I really thought this was an interesting aspect that the card, this like memory card you usually lose, and I thought that this slot being big and the memory cards being large, I mean, yeah, the housing, and they're kind of annoying to put away and store. I mean, if you could put a Genesis cart on a shelf, you can put one of these carts on a shelf as well. I mean, there's no difference. But either way, I thought this was really cool, how you could just put it in there, switch it out. Of course, though, they did have those cards that you can play international games. The only downside, it was that the fact that you had to actually, you know, swap it out, and unless you had one of those combo carts that had like 8 megabytes as well as the international converter. But other than that, you just put a memory card in here or the said international converter. And of course, again, for another, you know, quick summary, is that yes, you can put the VCD converter in here, so you can actually watch those bootleg discs on here in the disc tray. Now, I'm going to cover the discs of this console. Now, this is how they usually came. I mean, it usually came in like cardboard boxes, I believe a couple of the games did. But these were the discs. These were the cases. These were disappointing. I mean, the Japanese had the small compact disc, as they felt that, you know, smaller disc space, you know, was easier to store. And this was just gigantic. This is the same like atrocity that the Sega CD went through. It was like, holy crap. Again, it was basically this. It came with some foam. You put the foam down, it kept the disc down. I mean, this didn't come with foam. But, you know, this book had more graphics. The Dreamcast had a lot of potential, but sadly, that's where they went downhill. I mean, this was still a good medium, don't get me wrong. CDs are still a good medium to this date with, like, you know, music and distribution of, like, video, like light video clips and, you know, files, everything in the back of your computer. But again, 700 is, you know, not a lot of space in most games. I mean, this game, of course, Robotica, was an interesting game for its time, but again, it was not that. I'll show you some footage. You can see some footage of the gameplay and the processor. And again, you're gonna see how this game gets overworked. You're gonna see a lot of slowdowns in this game. I'm just gonna tell you right now. Now, another topic as well was that a lot of people wanted to see Sega Saturn games on the Virtual Console. I don't think that's really ever going to happen. That's the same thing with Sega CD. It's like way too much, like 700 megabytes would kill people's memory sticks for the Wii. I mean, yeah, Nintendo would be like, cha-ching, because everyone's like going out to buy like these SanDiscs and everything. I mean, more lines of Microsoft going cha-ching. But, again, I don't really see the Sega Saturn ever hitting the Virtual Console. It's really, they do it, you know, I'll take my hats off to them, but, again, I don't ever see that happen. Your best way of collecting these is obviously through the actual discs for the collection of the Sega Saturn console. But other than that, nothing else I can really say about this console. I mean, closing out, the controllers are that basically it's sort of like a, you know, a Super Nintendo controller. It has the two bumper buttons on the top here, which have a nice clicking noise, which I kind of enjoy. This is the Model 1. It's quite nice. I mean, there's a second model which had like two buttons over here, and people think this is annoying. I actually enjoy that noise. I mean, this does have an excellent D-pad. It's sort of similar to the design of the current generation, which Review Tech USA covered, of the D button for the Super Street Fighter controller that Mad Catz developed, which is kind of like fishy. But, you know, it's the same button design. And the buttons feel nice. It's all very comfortable to me. I mean, the ports for this you plug into your console kind of interesting too. The design's kind of tacky, but you know, looks like it would fit to the console and it will not, like, it's snug. So other than that, I'm gonna plug all this stuff in, hook it up, and show you some footage. Then after that, I will see you guys later, and thank you guys so much for watching.
In the year 2077, the regional nation-state that had until then helped maintain world order on Earth collapsed, and in its wake, a planetary government emerged to rule over mankind. To resolve the disputes, riots, and struggles that periodically erupted around the globe,